Hi everyone, and welcome back to On Our Spectrum. Thank you again for tuning in. I've been trying to record a video for the longest time, but I think I now realize how hard YouTubing is. But I committed to doing this, so I'm gonna keep on doing it. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or is it subscribe, like, and share? Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we can extend our reach of this channel. Today's video is probably going to be very short. I'm doing a review on all the books that I've read on autism since we got our diagnosis in 2021. Some of these books I've finished reading, some of these books I've not yet finished reading, and I'll explain why a bit later on. But yeah, I'll explain, the key things that I've taken out of these books, the key lessons that I've tried implementing that have worked for us, the things that I liked from these books, and some of the things that did not necessarily work for me from these books. The first book that I'm going to be reviewing is An Early Start for Your Child with Autism, and this says it uses everyday activities to help kids connect, communicate, and learn. It's written by Sally J. Rodgers, PhD, Geraldine Dawson, PhD, Laurie A. Vismarie, PhD, and this is the first book. The second book I'm going to be reviewing is The Manual That Never Came with Your Child. This one is written by Jane Jarvis. I hope I'm pronouncing that wrong. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, not wrong. And Debbie De Jong. Third book I'm going to be reviewing is I'm Not a Princess. My name is Abigail, and this book is written by Elfreda Baartman. Last book I'm going to be reviewing is Unbreakable, and this book is written by Nomsa Masoka. Right, so let's start with An Early Start for Your Child with Autism. I'll post a link. I bought this copy on Take A Lot, I think in 2021. When we got the diagnosis. Just a bit on the authors. It says that Sally is a professional psychiatrist at the Mind Institute at the University of California in Davis. Geraldine is a professor of psychiatry and the director of the Duke Center for Autism and Treatment at the Duke University. And Laurie is a clinical research scientist at Mind Institute at the University of California, Davis, and a board certified behavior analyst. The book also says that it uses proven methods based on the breakthrough Early Start Denver model. So like I said, this was the very first book that I had bought when we got our diagnosis with autism. And it was at the time recommended to us by Dr. Grissel, the neurodevelopmental pediatrician. And like I said, we got it on Take A Lot. There is really a line from the book that's probably stuck with me. For the longest of time, and obviously now I am not going to find it because I am looking for it, and I had highlighted it, like I highlighted everything else. I don't know why I'm not finding it. Anyway, it says that when your child, and I'm paraphrasing here, when a child is diagnosed with autism, you tend to want to do everything at the same time, and it feels like you're not doing enough. I wish I could find, I really wish I could find this line. Oh, come on. Okay, I really can't find it. Okay, and I think for me, I resonated with that a lot, because when we found the diagnosis, I wanted to do stuff. I wanted to know, what can I do? What should I not be doing? And even when I was doing stuff, it felt like I was not doing enough. I remember we were on a waiting list to see a speech therapist, and I felt like that waiting list was just not moving enough. And in retrospect, I think we waited for like 2 months up, but I think that also, it felt like everybody was not moving at the same urgency that I was moving at. And this book touches on that, because a lot of parents tend to experience that, there are other parents who go into shock, and not know what to do. But I think there's some parents like myself who want to get on with it and start doing stuff to help their children. This book has a lot of everyday strategies, right? That has taught me and us about communication, about engaging with my child, about how we can learn to play with him in general. Oh, I actually made a note. Not sure if you can see, it says purchase this book as recommended by Dr. Grissel, September 2021. Okay, I actually did make a note. Right. And I also made another note in 2021, and this was soon after we had found the diagnosis. It says, to Liana, you are and always be and always will be our sunshine. So it touched a bit on autism, what is autism, and it touches on the challenges relating to communications and communication with others and playing with toys in a typical ways. For example, it says here areas in which most children with autism spectrum disorder have difficulties. My AirPods keep connecting in and out, so I don't know how that's going to affect the sound of this. It's paying attention to other people, using social smiles, taking turns and engaging in social play, using gestures and language, imitating others, coordinating attention. So eye gaze with others and playing in a typical way with toys. I've not finished reading this book, right? Because it's quite a lot. So I've actually been reading it from 2021. And the reason why I've not finished reading is I'll try and implement one part, right? And then maybe I'll try and implement that for like 3 months, up to 4 months. And then maybe I'll say, okay, now that we have a full grasp of that, we'll then move on to something else. This was another line that actually touched me in the book. It says a central goal of early intervention is to help. So early intervention, if I'm understanding it correctly, it means like getting sort of help for your child early on in their lives with autism. So this would be like play therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. A central goal of early intervention is to help young children with autism spectrum disorder pay attention to key social learning opportunities like speech, face, gestures, and to boost and make more salient their attention to people and their actions, sounds, words, and faces, so that the children can more readily make sense of the information that is essential for typical language and social development. And this book has really taught us a lot of that. It's taught us about, activities that we can do to catch Liano's attention, activities that we can do to work on, turn taking, because it's something kids with autism spectrum disorder struggle with a lot. Activities that we can do to encourage is it verbality? But asking for things verbally to encourage a higher degree of communication, right? Activities that we can do to encourage Liano learn, and it has a very nice. So it will share stories about about other children. For example, it will say, in this case, it's Matthias, what Matthias struggled with. This is what the parents did, and what were the outcomes of that. And at the end of each chapter, right, it will give you this. It's called a refrigerator list, and it will give you a goal. So, for example, the goal at the end of this chapter is to use sensory social routines to increase your child's smile and laughter during face-to-face games and songs. So for example, the steps for this would be to find the smile, stay in the child's spotlight. So for example, for us, some of the activities we did would to stay in his spotlight. We'd take like toys that he's very interested in, and I'd play with them around my face so that we increase that eye contact, and Liano is then paying attention to the toy and essentially to my face. Accompanying, creating fun routines, songs, and physical games. There goes my AirPods again. Accompanying them with lively faces and narrating as you go. So, for example, when I take off his t-shirt, I'd say, t-shirt off, socks off, narrating. We narrate a lot as we go, and we try to narrate a lot as we go. Socks off, open the door, close the door, narrating a lot. And I think that book was very helpful to help us do that. Using stimulating objects to create sensory social routines. Pause often and wait for your child to cue you to continue. So for example, I'll sing a song, for example, if you're happy and you know it, and then because we practice this, or we'd sang the song a lot, and then I'd pause, and then I'd wait. This is to cue my child to then continue with the song, to say, clap your hands, or songs that he likes, happy birthday to you, and then I'd stop at a certain part, and this is to cue that he continues. So this is also to teach him, a bit of turn taking, and to increase his social skills. And then am I talking fast? And then using social sensory routines to optimize your child's arousal level for learning. So this was this book. It really touches on everything, and I think some of the things that we're doing with these therapists they'll sometimes refer to this book to say, oh, on chapter 6, for example, of we call them the yellow and the blue book, of chapter 6 of the yellow book, it talks about taking two to tango, building back and forth interactions, and I'd come and reference and augment that with what we're doing in therapy. So I've really enjoyed this book. It appears I read it this year. I hope you guys can see. I read it in March of this year, and I made a note. Liano burped and said sorry afterwards. And this chapter was about the importance of non-verbal communication, right? And it emphasized the importance that there's much more communicating than speaking, and we need to explore that. So whether we do it by cards, where Liana shows us a card, or it's by signs and signals, but we need to explore other avenues of communicating other than talking, right? So this was this chapter. Yeah, this was this book. I'm really enjoying this book. I'm really enjoying this book, and I think every chapter that I read, it becomes a learning for me. Sometimes I do go back to prior chapters. If there's something maybe I feel we're not quite aligned with, or there's elements that I think I need to refresh my memory with, I do go back to other chapters. But I'd really recommend this book. It's a very good book, and you can pace yourself. It's quite a big book. It's 342 pages. But like me, I'm taking it, I'm eating the elephant piece by piece. But yes, most of the, I don't want to say doctors, physicians, like doctors and speech therapists and whatnot, do recommend this book. So if you can, I'd really recommend this book. The second book that I am reading is The Manual That Never Came With Your Child, and this was written by Jane Jarvis and David Jong. Jane Jarvis is an educational psychologist, and David Jong is a remedial therapist involved in academic support for learners with learning difficulties. So I think this book Oh, and I've only read 2 chapters of this book, and I'll explain why. So I think this book is not necessarily autism focused, right? But it's focused really on a broad spectrum of kids. I really liked the first chapter, which was talking about catching the positive. So how when your child does something positive, we recognize that. But obviously, with an autistic child, he can't do something and then I make a big boo-ha. That I can't. My tone needs to be regulated. It can't alarm him. But catching the positive, I think from child to child, you'll know how to do that with your child, right? And it talks about how when you catch this positive and you recognize the good things that children do, it changes their behaviors as well. It's like us adults. If somebody praises you for something that you did, you get much more motivated to do it. In contrast to if somebody's screaming at you, and we really try not to do this with an autistic child. We can't find ourselves in a position where we scream at him, because it then unregulates him even more than he is already unregulated. The second chapter of this book, before we go to the second chapter, it also talked about rewards. It also talked about, when you have a star chart to say, if you did this, I'll give you a star. I think some of the things I struggled with this book, and like I said, I think it was not intended just for autistic kids. It was intended for a broad spectrum of kids. I struggled with this book because it depended a lot on verbal communication. So it would say, you explain this to a child, why this behavior, and I can, but I can't really explain to Leanne verbally why certain things. So I think it relied a lot on verbal communication, and sometimes that's a challenge with autism. Chapter 2 I really liked. It talked about organizing the bedroom. And the one thing I got from this that I've started doing, and I'll share these pictures, when we have that big box with toys, right? I think for kids with autism, it might not necessarily be the best way to do it. So the book then suggested that each type of toy, you have it in a separate box, and then you either label it outside or the box is clear. So I then got these clear boxes, and I've separated the toys to say, cars will be in this toy. What that has then done for us is, instead of Liano just throwing out the big basket with toys, he's then able to request for a certain type of toy. So he will then point at the box with the cars, and we know he's now requesting for cars. Or he'll then point at the box with the blocks, and then we can sort of, when he points, and then we say blocks, and then it encourages a higher form of communication. So that was one thing I took and I ran with from organizing the bedroom, and it's really stuck with us. Instead of just having one mess toy box, we've now separated toys, and that then helps us with Liano when he requests for things. He requests for specific things, and we can sort of build on our communication with that. So yeah, that is I've only read up until chapter 2 with this book, and I think I got this book earlier on this year. I'm still on chapter 2, and still about planning and organization, which talks to the example I made with the toys. It says planning and organizations are part of the executive functioning repertoire of the brain. This means that just as at the executive level of a corporation, management and critical decisions are made in the frontal lobe. As important as they are, the frontal lobe are the last part of the brain to develop, and only do so from about 4 to 5 years of age. This is why you cannot reason with a very child with a very young child. So I'm assuming it then gets even more difficult to reason with a young autistic child. This was the setup that I was talking about, and it's a nice colorful book. I like it. I really like it. So like I'm doing with the yellow book, I will read 1-2 chapters, implement that, get a firm grip on that, and then I add on to that. I'm quite scared I'd get overwhelmed if I read the whole book and then I'm like, this is how we're gonna do things. So this was the second book. I like the paper quality. I don't know why. The paper quality, it's proper. I like it. It's nice. It's nice. So I'll let you know how the rest of the read goes. But I really I like the feel of this book. It's got nice colors and stuff. But obviously I'm not that far with it yet. I'll also share the price of this book, but this book is 159 pages. And then this book was written by a friend of mine. It's I'm Not a Princess, My Name is Abigail. And it says that Elfreda has worked for Autism South Africa for the past 5 years as a regional development officer and is responsible for training and awareness within the province. It's quite a small book. It's quite compact and nice. I read this in one sitting. I think the last 2 books were written more from a professional perspective. The next 2 books that I'm going to review were written from a personal note. It's personal sharings, and I really appreciate that about it. This book is 33 pages, so really it's a nice book, and I think it was 70 rands, and I paid another 70 rands for shipping. But it really shares Elfreda's personal experience with and her family's experience with autism, and they really aim to encourage other families and friends and everybody who is in the neurodiverse community. I really enjoyed this book. I bought a copy for myself. I bought a copy for my mother. My mother also really enjoyed it because Elfreda and her husband had been the ones who had trained her on autism when we found out that Liana was autistic. So this is a really nice, compact book that you can get and read. And this copy is actually it's a signed copy for yeah. And then the last book. Yo guys, I feel like I'm talking too fast. I feel like I'm talking fast. I feel like I'm saying a million things at the same time. So how I got to know about this book, a friend of mine, Nalitsana, and I think I've talked about Nalitsana on this channel. She is such an advocate, for autism. She's so much on, and the work that she does really for advocating and creating awareness is great. So I think when she saw this, I think it was last week, if not the week before last, she said, did you see this? Have you seen this? And I'm like, no, I haven't seen this. Do you know this lady? I'm like, but I'll check it out and maybe I'll order the book and see it for myself. So it's written by Nomsa. Nomsa is a speech therapist and an audiologist, and she's also a mother of 3 children, and one of those children is living with autism. So I listened to a interview that Nomsa had. Nomsa Masoka, I think I said Masoka in the Nomsa Masoka. Apologies. I listened to an interview that Nomsa had done on the radio, and I was just blown away by, her clarity and the work that she does. She has an organization, an NPO organization called Mothers of Children with Autism, which was registered in 2015. I went on her website and I was just blown away. So I thought, let me order this one. So this is also signed copy for your girl. Says, dear Mika, thank you for your support. I hope and trust that this book will bless, heal, and inspire you to be the woman that God has destined you to be. never forget that you have an unbreakable spirit within you. I really enjoyed this book. So I think I did say that Nomsa is a speech therapist and an audiologist, but this book was not written from that perspective. It was written from her personal perspective as a mother to a child who's living with autism. Nomsa was so raw and honest in this book. I think I took about two days, 2 or 3 days to read it. I'd read it when I come home from work, and I said to my husband, I really felt seen after reading this book. I really felt, I can relate to this. I think Nomsa touched on things that even I think I would not have been comfortable to talk about, but because of the work and the dedication she has to breaking the stigma, she talked about it, and it was such a heartwarming experience. It was such a heartwarming experience for me that I wish I could close the book and reread it again from scratch. She talks about how she met her husband. She talks about the birth of her child. She talks about the impact of autism on her marriage. And I think we said, my husband and I asked him to read like this first page, and I was like, as much as we go through the motions and our focus is always on, autism, but I think we also need to recognize that the diagnosis itself, it may have an impact on our relationship as partners and as husband and wife. So that was really a good eye opener for me. She talks about the impact of raising a child with autism and then having other children and managing those dynamics. And I think at the back of my mind, I'd always thought about how would it work out when we have younger children, because we have an older son, but that relationship, it's gone fairly smoothly, if I can say, but I'd always wondered what it would be like when there's younger children in the mix. And Nomsa didn't leave anything unturned. If you're looking for something to relate to, if you're really looking for a good read, I would recommend this book. I bought it for 200 rands, and I paid 100 rand for delivery, and I think it was delivered the next day after she had signed it. I really wished I could read more. I'm really hoping that maybe in the next 5 years, Nomsa will write another book and take us through the work, because in the last chapter, she talks about, just give me a second, I'd made notes, but now, because the camera she talks about a center named after her mother that I think she was in the process of opening for adults with autism. And I thought, that's such a good initiative, because after school, how do we then keep adults with autism engaged? How do we create a safe environment, or something that they can do after school? And that's her vision, and I think I'd like to see how it unfolds. I'd love to read another book in the next 5 years. So thank you for your honesty, Nomsa. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for sharing your life and your story and your family with us in this book. I really did enjoy reading this book. It was an eye-opener for me. It also created room for certain conversations within our own family. So I appreciate that. And that is it. That is my read. So if you have any other books that you can recommend, please do drop them on the chat, or if there's anything you are reading, please, I'd like to know. Or if you've read any of the books that I've touched on, and there's something specific from those books that has stayed with you, please do share that with me. But yeah, this is what I'm currently reading, and like I said, I keep going back to books, to the same books, and if there's parts that I feel like I may not have grasped properly, I go back to it. I said this is going to be a short video, but it turned out to be a very long one. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you again next time.